Remember Iraq's protest movement? Well, despite killing and intimidation, despite the COVID pandemic, those brave young men and women are still clamoring for wholesale reform. 2019 exposed the same sectarian trap as in Lebanon, a multi-confessional constitution that makes friends of bitter rivals who share a stake in preserving the current power-sharing system. Fast forward to the run-up to next Sunday's general election in Iraq and a campaign fraught with more violence and intimidation, as you will see in a moment in an exclusive France 24 report. Do the protesters boycott or brave the danger? Vote or vote with their feet? Today, in a special edition of the France 24 debate, has the revolution been stolen? Joining us from Washington, investigative reporter Man Al-Jizani, member of the End Impunity in Iraq activist group. Thank you for joining us. From London, former Iraqi Energy Minister Luay Al-Khatib. He's Distinguished Fellow at the Center of Global Energy Policy at Columbia University. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
The France 24 debate, where you've been reacting on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Our own Jonathan Walsh and Ammar al-Hamidawi landed in Baghdad and went to the Shia heartland, to Basra, Karbala, and for this exclusive report for Reporters, the France 24 investigative news magazine.
Downtown Karbala, once a center of mass protests, has now been abandoned by demonstrators. Many died here during clashes with security forces. Others were murdered in cold blood. Among them, Ihab al-Wazni, one of the most respected figures of the uprising. "40 days after his death, al-Wazni's family gathers to mourn at his gravesite.
قتله صوت حر وطني يعني كان يريد يعني عيشة كريمة للشعب للفقراء أن يتحسن الوضع المعيشي للشعب يتحسن الوضع المعيشي للفقراء ويبين حقيقة هذه الأحزاب والميليشيات التي تقتل الشعب العراقي منذ سنين وتسرق أمواله وتبعثها لدول أخرى كإيران وغيرها.
اي اشوفهم هم اشوفهم يسرحون يمرحون ويفترون يباوعون يمكن هم ويانا يمشون واحنا ما ندري لانه جبناء وخونه اريد يكشف عن القضاء يكشف عن القتله اذا ما كشفوا عن القتله فالقضاء السلام عليهم.
Open accusations like these are common now in a country where armed factions are more numerous and more powerful than ever. Dozens of activists have been murdered since the end of 2019. They were the leaders of the October Revolution, a massive, unprecedented movement that challenged the corruption of Iraq's political class and the stranglehold that foreign powers have on the country.
طبعا هذا مكان التنفيذ اللي صار لأن هو يجي من هنا ويرجع للخلف حتى أنه يصف السيارة بالمكان اللي يريده. السيارة اجت يعني تحركت بعد التنفيذ ظلت تتحرك ذاتيا توقفت هنا بالضبط بهاي المنطقة هنا هذه المنطقة اللي توقفت بها.
On May 9th, 2021, a security camera captured Al-Wazni's murder. But the video's resolution is too low to identify the killers.
ساعة واحدة 12:30 و5 يعني شلون فشي وقت مؤقت شلون ب 12:30 و5 هو جاي بسحور وياه بالسيارة اجى هذا الولد جيراننا جا قام يصيح ام محمد قلت له ويهاب جا باوع وجهه ما ينشاف وجهه من الدماية وممطول قعدوه يقول أنا مهدد يسولف يقول أنا مهدد ما أدري بيا ساعة أموت أقول له من اللي يهددك يقول اليوم 1.5 سنة من هددني قاسم مصلح قال لي أصفيك.
Originally from Karbala, Qasim Muzla is a high-level commander in the Hasht al-Shabi, the Popular Mobilization Forces, a powerful paramilitary group integrated into the Iraqi armed forces. He was arrested after the Al-Wazni family pressed charges. The PMF, furious, stepped up its shows of force, particularly in Baghdad's Green Zone, the ultra-high security neighborhood that serves as the seat of government. Authorities declined to intervene.
الحشد الشعبي يسيطرون على الوزارة ليش على رئيس وزراء ما يقدر يحكي شنو ما يقدر يحكي اكو رئيس وزراء ما يقدر يحكي بيا قانون هذا كل اقوى الميليشيات على البلاد كلها على الشعب وعلى الجيش وعلى حتى الجيش العراقي ما يقدر يحكي.
القوات الأمنية سمحت لبعض الميليشيات من التجول لبضعة ساعات داخل وسط مدينة بغداد لكون احنا يعني في حالة حصول يعني بعض يعني سوء التفاهم خلينا نسميه لا يمكنها أن تتدخل بشكل يؤدي إلى إراقة الدماء في الشوارع العراقية.
Qasim Muzla was freed after 2 weeks of detention to a hero's welcome from his men.
أن إطلاق سراح هكذا متهم في هكذا ظروف وذو نفوذ عالي سوف يؤثر على سير التحقيق حتما بل أن هناك عدد من الأشخاص كانوا يعني شهودا انجروا أو سحبوا أنفسهم من القضية.
This ally of the Popular Mobilization Forces rejects the accusations, denouncing what he calls a witch hunt.
الصورة التي رسمت لذوي الشهداء والضحايا هي صورة إعلامية جزء من بروباغندا الإعلام الذي زرعها في أذهانهم إلصاق التهم بجماعات أخرى رسخت لهم لكنهم لا يمتلكون دليل وهذا ما حدث في حادثة أم إيهاب الوزني رحمه الله عندما اتهمت قاسم مصلح وبرأه القضاء.
Despite efforts at the highest levels of government, the investigation in the holy Shiite city of Karbala remains at a standstill. In Baghdad, friends and relatives of assassinated activists have come from around the country after the death of Ihab al-Wazni.
نظمنا هذا الاحتجاج لعدم كشف قتلة الشهيد إيهاب الوزني وقتلة الشهيد فهم الطائي وبدأوا بالتسويف كما حصل في قضية والدي.
The United Nations mission here has gotten involved, doing its part to put pressure on the government.
Ihab al-Wazni was very respected. He was a person that I'd like to listen to as well because he was not only an activist, but also a realist. And this is what Iraq needs. So when I got the news that he was assassinated, I was devastated. The Prime Minister emphasized time and again that he is very serious about bringing this investigation forward, but surely things could be done a bit more rapidly. So again, while expressing my understanding for a complex environment, I can only call on authorities to speed up and to make sure that justice is done.
شخصيا انه انا ميليشيا ودت رسول خاص وبلغني رسميا انه انت اذا رجعت حياتك تنتهي خلاص رسميا يعني مو كان رسائل قلت لك هسه لا يعني صعب اذكر اسمها لانه بالاخير حياتي تنتهي خلاص.
Hussein al-Horabi fled from Nasiriyah, a city in the south that has long been the epicenter of the protests. He's a leading face of the movement in a region vital to the Iraqi economy. He now lives on the run, his family home targeted by an explosive device.
الحكومة لا تعلن من هذه الجهات التي تنفذ العمليات الإرهابية. بالتأكيد هذا إرهاب يعني تفجير البيوت الآمنة يعني أنا جدتي إلى الآن من تفجير بيتي هي مصابة. حينما نقيم دعاوى لا تنفذ هذه الدعاوى حقيقة.
Hussein al-Horabi now dreams of a life in politics.
أن هناك واجب أخلاقي علي التضحيات التي سقطت في تشرين أن أوصل صوتهم. المعاناة الكبيرة والألم والحرمان الذي وقع على المناطق الجنوبية بالذات تكرر بعد سقوط نظام البعث ونظام صدام حسين. لا عدالة اجتماعية، لا خدمات، لا فرص عمل متساوية بين العراقيين. هذا ما دفع الشارع العراقي إلى الخروج باحتجاجات تشرين وثورة تشرين.
It was from the disadvantaged south that militias recruited en masse to fight the Islamic State group. Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani, Iraq's highest Shia authority, called for taking up arms against the jihadis in 2014. Since then, these armed groups have seen an unprecedented rise in power with the help of neighboring Iran. Today, they are accused of wanting to snuff out the October Revolution.
نحن أبناء المجتمع الجنوبي، نحن أبناء الهم العراقي وننحدر من نفس المناطق التي يدعون الدفاع عنها، لكنهم وجهوا بنادقهم وكواتمهم نحو رؤوسنا وهم يعتقدون أن الدولة العراقية الحديثة التي يطالب بها أبناء تشرين إن تحققت وكانت سيتم زوال هؤلاء الميليشيات.
We're driving to Basra, oil capital of the south. Iran is just a few kilometers away. The control of the militias here is especially strong. The city's walls tell the tragic story of Riham Yakoub, murdered in August 2020. A brilliant university student, this feminist made a name for herself well before the October Revolution, when she created a sports center in this highly conservative region. Her parents describe an exceptional personality.
اللي هي قدرت اللي وحدها اللي يمكن احنا ما ساعدناها انه تفتح مشروعها الخاص اللي هو يمكن اكبر جيم بالبصره موجود 400 الاخ 6 مشتركه عندها فكم هائل من النساء بالاضافه لمتابعاتها على صفحاتها.
البنات البصره كلهم كانوا منطوين بس من جدتي هي شلون حررتهم يعني حررتهم وعطتهم ثقه بنفسهم. هي طموحه كلش طموحه. دائما تقول هذه اصير وزير الرياض وزيره الرياض. احنا نضحك وين الصير.
But Riham Yakoub's efforts soon turned even more political. In this city where the inhabitants have so little, the young woman put her popularity to work, like during this 2018 protest.
مو شغلة إنه أنا أستغل موقعي، بس إنه البنات يثقون بي ويحبوني ويعرفون الشيء جاي نسويه صح. فقلت ليش إنه أنا ذكرت فيما سبق إنه مجرد بوست واحد ساعة ب11 بالليل نشرته أمس، قلت لهم باكر بالأربعة نتجمع نطلع تظاهرة بدون أي سؤال بدون أي استفسار. شوفين ذول النساء قدامك.
At the time, Claudia Raymond was very close with Riham. The two women took the lead of the march, their commitment even drawing the attention of and an invitation from the American consulate.
كان عيد المرأة، فكان عندنا تكريم للفتيات القياديات بالبصرة، فكان عندنا صور مع القنصل، فتم نشر هاي الصور على أنه إحنا عميلات وكذا. كمية الهجوم والتسقيط اللي تعرضت له ريهام كان كلش كبير، كان كافي إنه هو يخلي الميليشيات تبقى تحاول إنه هي تقتله.
When the protests reached unprecedented levels in the end of 2019, Riham Yakoub decided to reduce her public exposure. But her precautions weren't enough. She was murdered on August 20th, 2020.
بالشارع دراجة تعرضت لها وضربتها، كانت اعتقد يعني حسب ما وصلتني معلومات انه هي مباشرة فارقت الحياة، لان الرصاصات اثنين براسها وواحدة بصدرها وواحدة برقبتها. بصراحة ماكو شيء اقدر اوصفه من بريهام غير انه اقول هي انسانة عظيمة، وخسارتها خسارة لنساء العراق اجمع.
Just before her death, a major Iranian press agency had once again written about her visit to the consulate. For her father, there's no doubting the link.
فهاي الجريدة تحرض وتقول إنه هذول الناس عملاء للأمريكان، إنه وعندهم علاقات بالقنصلة الأمريكية، بينما هي كانت دعوة. أنت شنو قاتل مدير CIA؟ ابدا هي بسيارتها وجايه تمشي وفي امان الله. شنو قالت لهم؟ لان الماي مالح، او لانه طالب طلبات هي ما محتاجه شيء، بس انه حست انه بلدها راح ينهار، بلدها انتهى، ولذلك هي طلعت.
The Iraqi Prime Minister visited Riham Yakoub's parents just after her death to make a public commitment.
أفعالها أعمالها خيرية في هذه المدينة الطيبة، أهل المدينة خلتهم يرتجفون خائفين حسنا بدم الشهيد ودم كل شهداء العراق. المجرمين سوف ينفذون من العقاب.
The investigation into her murder identified a suspect, a member of Asaib Ahal al-Haq, a pro-Iranian faction. An elite police unit tried to arrest him, but was met with heavy firepower and forced to retreat. Events that were confirmed to us by a senior intelligence official in Basra. The spokesman of the accused group gave us his version of the story.
الإعلام المعادي المغرض يستغل أي حادثة لتضخيمها وتكبيرها. الشخص هذا ليس منتميا إلى العصائب. نحن نعتقد بأن المتضرر الوحيد من عملية اغتيال المتظاهرين هي الحكومة نفسها وفصائل المقاومة والحشد الشعبي، لأن أي حادث يحدث الأصابع تتحول باتجاه هذه الجهات الثلاثة، وأنا أعتقد بأن الهدف من الاغتيالات هو هذا. هناك تدخل أمريكي في الموضوع، ومن يطالع الوثائق الموجودة سيكتشف بأن عملية قتل المتظاهرين هي عملية ليست بجديدة، ونحن حذرنا منها كثيراً.
In Basra, the climate of impunity has driven many activists to flee, including Claudia Raymond, who has also been the target of an attempted murder.
بالبصرة لا حياة، فقط موت. يا أما أنت تكون تابع لهم يا أما تموت. ما تقدر تعبر عن رأيك أصلاً داخل البصرة. تمشي حتى الإعلاميين الصحفيين، ما أريد أحدد بالأسماء، لكن الأغلبية ما أقول هم كلهم، الأغلبية تم شرائهم. بعد مقتل أحمد عبد الصمد البصرة تم تغييبها إعلامياً.
Ahmad Abdesamad was the Basra correspondent for the national network Dijla. A politically engaged journalist, he covered the October Revolution extensively.
مظاهرات البصرة تعود من جديد للمطالبة برحيل الفاسدين. الفاسدين هم الأحزاب والميليشيات والمسؤولين. اليوم أهل البصرة مظاهرات مسلمية، ماكو أي عمليات حرق الممتلكات العامة ولا أكو أي مندسين.
Ahmad was killed on January 10th, 2020, using the same MO. His colleague, Safar Ali, was driving. He died several hours later of his wounds.
بس صفا كان بي نفس إن أخذوه للمستشفى الجمهوري. إني جيت أنا بس قالوا هذا أخو أحمد أخو أحمد، فسحوا لي المجال. قمت أبص صفا قلت له صفا وين أحمد؟ هو يعني بنفس يصعد وينزل. بديت أغلط يعني على العملاء، على المرتزقة، على إيران، يعني هي السبب، يعني الأوامر إيرانية.
The murder investigation is one of the few that has led to actual arrests. Suspects were clearly identified and accused, but the courts have yet to convict.
المجرمين تم إلقاء القبض عليهم، مو مثل اكو هوايه يعني
تابعين لاي جهه؟
تابعين جهه حزبيه ميليشياويه، هم كتائب حزب الله معروفين، هم صرحوا كرئيس الوزراء صرح باسمهم، يعني مو انا اقول كتائب حزب الله. جاي ننتظر اللحظه ان ينحالوا الى جنايات، ناجل الحكم عليهم. ف ان هذا من ينحالون الجنايات للحكم جاي اكو تقاعس، اكو تكاسل.
We've asked to meet with a commander from Kataib Hezbollah, to no avail. The group is one of the closest to the Iranian government, created with the support of the country's Revolutionary Guards. The assassinations have targeted the rebellion's thought leaders, but they're part of a systematic campaign of violence that goes back to the origin of the movement. A heavy-handed crackdown on protests triggered a bloodbath from the earliest days of the October Revolution.
Les armes qui ont été utilisées contre les manifestants, ça dépasse l'entendement. Les blessures étaient des blessures de guerre. C'est vraiment une répression que moi j'ai rarement vue dans le cadre de manifestations.
Entre le 1er octobre et le 31 décembre de cette année-là, 2019, il y a eu 600 morts. Mais ce n'est pas rien, ce n'est jamais arrivé de 2003 à 2021, 600 morts, 21 000 blessés, 29 000 incarcérés. Donc le degré de la répression était terrible, était terrible.
The resignation of the Iraqi Prime Minister in November 2019 failed to end the violence. An official commission was convened to document human rights violations, but it has been silenced.
كثيرا ما لقينا مطالبات بإيقاف إعلان هذه الأرقام، وكانت الجهات الحكومية تحاول التقليل من هذه الأعداد، والأعداد هي لغة الأرقام هي لغة عالمية، هي تكشف ما يجري من أعمال العنف.
Security forces have accepted some responsibility, but insist that they have weeded the bad actors from among their ranks.
أدين القوات الأمنية التي استخدمت بشكل مباشر الذخيرة الحية، سواء يعني من خلال تصرفاتها الفردية أو إحساسها بالخطر وبالتالي الدفاع عن نفسهم من خلال استخدام الذخيرة الحية.
But the direct agents of the crackdown have never had cause to worry. Despite targeting protesters early in the rebellion with illegal actions of extreme violence.
If you refer to snipers on the roofs of buildings, I can only confirm this was the case, definitely in the early days of the demonstrations. Does that mean that these snipers were part of an official security force, or were they part of an armed group operating outside state control? I think it's the latter.
الجهات اللي متحكمة بالدولة ما رادت صوت آخر، لجأت إلى القمع. بالطبع منهم هذا الصور لدينا تحقيق عميق، لأن الدولة اتهمت بها، أجهزة الدولة اتهمت بذلك. نعم أجهزة الدولة في ربما اخترقت.
بدر لديها جناح عسكري، التيار الصدري لديه جناح عسكري، العصائب لديها جناح عسكري، والكتائب وكثير من هذه الميليشيات هي من تمتلك السلاح خارج نطاق الدولة، وهي من تمتلك العجلات بدون أرقام، وهي من تمتلك الكواتم. بالتالي حينما تصدر هذه الجرائم من نتهم؟ منطقا نتهم هذه الجهات التي تمتلك هذا السلاح خارج نطاق الدولة.
No one doubts the involvement of the armed groups, but one key figure is regularly credited as the mastermind of the repression. Iranian General Qasem Soleimani was a frequent visitor to Iraq during the first months of the uprising.
Qasem Soleimani en personne avait mis en place un comité, bien évidemment, il ne l'a pas appelé comité de répression, c'était comité de stabilité et de sécurité, quelque chose de cette nature-là. Soleimani en personne élaborait le programme quotidien de la répression de ce mouvement de contestation.
The great architect of Iran's regional expansion had a wide network of paramilitary groups in place to call upon.
Nous avons au moins 75 organisations miliciennes qui dépendent idéologiquement et géopolitiquement à la République islamique de l'Iran. C'est-à-dire leur allégeance va directement vers Ali Khamenei et non pas vers le Premier ministre ou l'État irakien.
In the face of constant violence, protesters openly accuse their powerful neighbor. Iranian diplomatic interests are targeted by demonstrations in a number of cities across the south.
Ces jeunes, ces manifestations, c'est une attaque à leur influence, c'est une menace pour le pouvoir régional que l'Iran souhaite jouer, et donc il faut qu'il soit rendu silencieux.
Tehran has a response at the ready. For them, Washington is behind the October Revolution. A new bone of contention between the sworn enemies on the Iraqi battlefield. Iran's supreme leader has personally published a message denouncing a conspiracy to sow division. At the end of 2019, at the height of the rebellion, American airstrikes killed dozens from among the ranks of the Kataib Hezbollah. Armed factions organized a rally in front of the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. Many of their most influential leaders showed up.
وهذه السفارة هي التي تتصل إساءة الفوضى في الوسط والجنوب السوري. إذا هم يعملون على ضرب المكونات العراقية كلها.
بعلمي ومعلوماتي وأنا مطلع لحد ما لم تقدم أي من السفارات الغربية أي دعم إلى الأحرار، أي دعم كان. ووجود انتفاضة شيعية علمانية مدنية تطالب بحقوق الإنسان لا بحقوق السيد، وتطالب بحقوق المجتمع. ما أرعب إيران.
In the early hours of January 3rd, 2020, America struck an unprecedented blow against the Iranian regime with a drone strike in Baghdad that eliminated Qasem Soleimani. alongside Abu Mahdi al-Mohandes, military chief of the Popular Mobilization Forces. While their supporters raged, cheers of joy sounded from the protesters.
الساعة 4:30 احتفالات بمقتل سليماني. هذا حوضة الشهداء اللي راحت ودم الشهداء والضحايا والشهداء العراقيين كلهم طلعت في اليوم.
But the euphoria would be short-lived as the armed factions closed ranks following Soleimani's death. Even the powerful Muqtada al-Sadr, an avowed nationalist, quickly called for an end to the rebellion. His men were first ordered to protect the rallies, but clashes with protesters grew frequent.
من كانت الثورة سلمية وعلى مسارها الحقيقي غصبا علي وغصبا على القبعات الزرق يدافعون عن الثورة. بني شوية زلت قلت لك لابد نجر أذان ما تقبل خطأ لأنه هواي أكو مشاغبين بيهم.
In February 2020, Sadr's followers were accused of having killed several protesters in the holy city of Najaf. By exposing the stranglehold of religious parties and their armed wings, the October Revolution has called into question the very foundations of the modern Iraqi state. After 2003, the religious political system gave a leading place to Shiites, who had been persecuted under Saddam Hussein. But the leaders of this community have made their paramilitary groups into all-powerful forces. Example, this Popular Mobilization Forces parade. Officially, these troops are part of the regular armed forces, but they march alone to mark the anniversary of their creation in the presence of the Prime Minister and the leaders of Iraq's most powerful armed groups.
Pour moi, les milices ne sont pas à l'extérieur de l'État. Les milices ne sont pas un État dans l'État. Les milices sont l'État et elles ont l'État.
أخطأنا كأحزاب سياسية عندما سمحنا لهذه الفصائل أن تنمو أولاً ومن ثم أن تتحرك خارج نطاق الدولة، وبالتالي وصلنا إلى حالة شبه فوضى.
It's a hold that leaves little place for effective justice.
Le gouvernement de Mustafa Kazmi dispose, à ma connaissance, toutes les informations précises sur le profil des acteurs qui ont assassiné les leaders du mouvement de contestation.
On fait face à une approche systémique de l'impunité. Aucune action n'est prise et les crimes continuent. À Amnesty International, sur la base de nos enquêtes, nous avons conclu qu'il s'agissait probablement d'une situation qui pourrait constituer un crime contre l'humanité.
Fear is gaining ground. The murders continue. The son of Fatima Al-Bahadili, a well-known Basra activist, was killed in the end of July 2021, again after repeated threats from armed groups. And yet, voices still rise to carry the ideas of the October Revolution.
البصرة ما عادت بندقية الشرق مثل سابقا، لا البصرة حاليا هي تجمع للأحزاب والميليشيات المسلحة، مخدرات، سلاح، كل شيء سيء موجود حاليا بالبصرة. كل اللي أتمناه لهاي محافظتي الجميع إنه هي تتخلص من هذا الشيء، إنه الحكومة تكون قادرة على إنه هي تثبت وجودها بالبصرة.
البعد يحرمني هذه المساحة أنه أتحرك بها. لكن رغم هذا مواقع التواصل الاجتماعي ومن خلال الهاتف نستطيع أن نساهم بكثير من الحملات مع أخوتنا في الاحتجاج العراقي. وأيضاً خلسة أتواجد في مدينتي بأكثر من مرة وبأكثر من مظاهرة، أذهب بدون ما تعرف هذه الجهات الميليشياوية.
الشيء اللي أريد توصل بنتي أو غيرها اللي انقتلوا أبرياء في سبيل الكلمة، إنه حياة لهذا الشعب، هذا الشعب داينج يعني محتضر. ريهام راحت والحمد لله والشكر توفت مرفوعة الرأس وإحنا مرفوعين الرأس بيها. بس شنو السبب اللي خلى اللي أدى لهذا الانهيار بهذا البلد؟
Yeah, Ammar Al-Hamidawi and Jonathan Walsh with that report. We were speaking to Jonathan just a few moments ago, and I'll put it to our panelists who join us again from Washington. Investigative reporter Man Al-Jizani, member of the End Impunity in Iraq activist group, and from London, former Iraqi Energy Minister Luay Al-Khatib, distinguished fellow at the Center of Global Energy Policy at Columbia University. Jonathan Walsh, Man Al-Jizani, was telling us how he was awed by the fact that the families wanted to speak out in front of the camera despite the risk. Your thoughts on what you just saw and the bravery that continues?
Yeah, this is Iraq, unfortunately. This is the version of Iraq that it's been always hidden. They've been always trying to show another fabricated version of a democratic Iraq. As you all see, there's a lot of fear in Iraq. There's a lot of blood. Maybe you showed two cases of the activists who were killed in the past 2 years, but there's hundreds of them, and there's hundreds, maybe thousands of them flee out of the country, just like Hussein al-Ghurabi and other activists. And in this environment, everyone is asking Iraqis to go and participate in democratic election. I mean, this is not logic. What Iraqis been trying to say that there is a huge impunity problem in Iraq. Iraq has never been a stable country. It was insurgency, and then terrorism, and then corruption all the time, and then militias. And Iraqis are dying in the past 18 years, and hundreds of thousands of them, and always with impunity. So Iraqis today, they're asking for a new start, and you cannot have a new start with impunity. You need to hold the criminals accountable. You need to end the corruption in the country. You need to disarm all the groups and militias. As you notice, the former prime minister in Iraq, he's asking for an investigation to know who's controlling the country. Janine Blaskar doesn't know who's controlling the country. I mean, this is crazy. Iraqi people have been blaming the international community, and international community blaming the Iraqi people, but we have to end this. Iraqis need to work with international community to force the law. Iraqis need help to, asking Iraqis to go for a democratic election after all this blood is not a solution. Because if you need to start, you have to have a fresh start. You need to hold the criminals accountable, and then force the law and then ask Iraqis to go for a democratic election.
Well, let me bring in Louay Al-Khatib on this. We see in the report at one point that poignant scene where Iraq's prime minister goes to visit the family of one of the assassinated people. I believe it was that news anchor we see at that point. And Mustafa Al-Kadhimi pledges that there won't be impunity this time. What was going through your mind when you saw that part of the report?
Well, there is no doubt that this report it's painful to watch. I mean, we lived it. I mean, we saw this what happened not only just in 2019, but in the past years. Let's not forget summer 2018. Let's not forget the fallen youth and the protesters in the past years. There is what we saw in 2019 and 22, regardless of the magnitude and the size of these protests, and we will continue to see, is a result of at least 10, 11 years of protest, public resentment that's grown up year on year against the political quota system. The thing is that one need to understand that we cannot look into the Iraq case or what is happening from one protest or one incident, no matter how significant that incident or the experience that the Iraqi people went through. This is a country that went through terrible eras of dictatorship, of military rules, of totalitarian regime, chaos, and so on. Even the so-called democracy that was introduced to Iraq was way too early. No one should expect or at least accept a total democracy, a carte blanche for the people kind of like to express their freedom immediately after complete totalitarian regimes, that they are yet to understand the ABCs of a Western democracy that went through 200, 300 years, yet you expect to copy and paste it on Iraq experience and expect a better results within 10, 15 years. What the Iraqi needed is a transition period to understand the situation post the collapse of the regime.
So what light does that shed on the elections that are taking place next Sunday? What do those elections mean? Again, you have the same kind of system that you have in Lebanon, where we know that the prime minister will be a Shia, the president is a Kurd, and the speaker of parliament a Sunni. And these vested interests who are rivals, they seem to all agree to keep the system the way it is.
Well, the situation in Iraq is a bit different from Lebanon. One cannot expect it to kind of like mirroring the exact. Yes, the ethno-sectarian kind of like divide aspect of it is similar, but there are so many things are different in Iraq. At the end of the day, Iraq, to a certain extent, financially in a better position than Lebanon, and it stands on its feet if.
And most of the people we see, by the way, protesting in that report are Shias protesting against Shia militant groups. So it is a problem in the heartland, in the south. Why is that?
Because the south and most of the Shia-dominated cities are badly neglected in the past 18 years, and unfortunately, all the budgets and the finance and the financial allocations put to those cities were siphoned through the political quota system that's completely corrupt. And I said that before my appointment as minister, during my appointment as minister, and now. And I keep repeating this. These things need to be changed. Iraq needs a radical change on a social level, political and economic. But there is no reform or change come with pain-free, I'm afraid. And time matters. So you ask about the election that's taking place on the 10th of October. We have no option but to go through it and participate strongly and select and basically elect those independent individual with the hope that over 2 or 3 terms of election, we can gradually change the political scene and reform the the politics of the country within 10 years or so.
Well, let me bring in Manji Al-Jizani on this. You agree that your fellow citizens should go to the polls on Sunday and vote?
Well, the problem is that Iraqis never had a choice. Since 2005, when the constitution was voted for, under the car bombs, they were asking Iraqis to go and decide their destiny. And in every other election, and even in this one, they always put Iraqis under pressure. But this is not supposed to be the choice. I mean, your guest just said that there is a huge problem in Iraq and we need transition time. But at the same time, he's asking Iraqis to go and participate in the elections. I mean, this is not going to work. I mean, there is a blood on the ground. There is a lot of Iraqis got killed, and there is no real definition for the state. Like we just said, like the Shia are dominating the state, the country, but at the same time they have militias out of the state. I mean, what kind of game is that? Yeah, even you rule the country and you build the country and help your people to build their future, or just destroy everything. But this is gonna not work for like you cannot ask people to go and participate in an election while the government are so weak and cannot protect people. We just saw the Iraqi activists out of the country. They don't know what to do.
And we saw in that exclusive report how a lot of the victims' families speaking out and pointing the finger at neighboring Iran. Has Iraq lost some of its sovereignty over the last few years?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Has Iraq lost some of its sovereignty when you see in that report how many people openly blame Iran for their problems?
Yes, I mean, it's very clearly. You see the Iranian influence in Iraq. Everyone knows that. Iran is controlling everything in the country.
Everything?
Yes, everything. I mean, if you see the reports 2 years ago when the protest break down and everyone was talking about Qasem Soleimani's role in killing the people in Iraq. I mean, everyone knows, even the United States and Europe and everyone is talking about the Iranian influence. Even the Iraqi officials themselves. I mean, we have met Al-Qadimi a year and a half ago here in Washington, D.C., and he was talking about the Iranian influence and about the militias that backed by Iran and how they are controlling the country. And he's very weak and he cannot do anything.
Well, let me ask. Let me just put the question because we're running a little short on time. Louay Al-Khatib, we see among those running in Sunday's election one candidate openly affiliated with the Kataib Hezbollah brigades, which you saw were called out in that report, and he says we are not extremists. Others should not think like that. Your thoughts on the fact that you have a candidate, his name is Hussein Mouanis, who is affiliated with Kataib Hezbollah?
Well, Francois, let's not reduce the discussion to X or Y. The issue is that we really need to highlight here is that Iraq is surrounded by 6 countries. Each country has a different and conflicting foreign policy to Iraq. Talking about Iraq's sovereignty's loss. Well, Iraq lost its sovereignty back in 1991, and it continues, and still its sovereignty being compromised badly because of the international intervention from regional players as well as international players. One should really take into consideration that Iraq going through transition period. When I talked about transition period, one need to take into consideration that the state building prerequisites. We are for Iraq to see a light at the end of the tunnel. We need a good 2 to 3 stable government terms to move things forward and to correct the path. For any reporters or analysts or any viewers expect that reforms and democracy could flourish in Iraq in 20 years or even 50 years is completely out of their mind. It took the United States a quarter of a millennium to reach today's democracy, so as Europe and so on. So one should not expect Iraq to witness some sort of democracy to be materialized over 15 years. I'm not talking about we need about 100 or 200 years, but we really need about at least a generation for that gradual reform and development to take its place. And I'm hopeful of the future that things will correct. The future will be better for Iraq, but we really need to act fast and smart. What is the alternative of the election? Chaos. We have no option but to go for election, even if this election produced 5% better results than the last one. It's better than nothing.
Better than nothing, you say. Unfortunately, we're running short on time. So much more to talk about. Louay Al-Khatib, I want to thank you so much for joining us today from London. I want to thank Maan Al-Jazani in Washington. Again, you can see that our exclusive report in Reporters, the France 24 investigative news magazine, and on our website, france24.com. More to come. Stay with us.